going to ignore that law of increasing opportunity costs. We're going to assume that all the resources within one economy are the same. We could add back in the assumption that resources are not always the same. All it would do is complicate our story, and it wouldn't add anything to the bottom line. It would just make life miserable. It's hot enough in here. We don't need to make life miserable by making a difficult assumption. So we're going to assume that opportunity costs are constant. Suppose that in Alta, in the economy of Alta, they can devote all of their resources to rice production, and in that case, they would be able to produce 1,000 units of rice and no units of corn. They can devote all of their resources to corn production, in which case they can produce 100 units of corn and no rice, or they can split their resources between rice and corn and produce some mix, some rice and some corn. Suppose that in Beta, they can use all of their resources to produce rice, in which case they would produce 1,000 units of rice. They can use all of their resources to produce corn, in which case they would produce 2,000 units of corn but no rice, or they can produce some mix of rice and corn. These pictures are going to show back up on the subsequent slides, so don't panic when it goes away in a second. So we're going to use this information to figure out for each Alta and Beta, what's the opportunity cost of producing more rice, what's the opportunity cost of producing more corn. In Alta, what we had was they can produce 1,000 units of rice and no units of corn, or 100 units of corn and no units of rice, or something in between. We can use that information to figure out what's the opportunity cost of producing rice. If Alta wants to produce 1,000 units of rice, they have to forego, not take advantage of, forego the opportunity to produce corn. If they're going to produce 1,000 units of rice, and only that, they would have to give up the opportunity to produce 100 units of corn. They could do 100 units of corn, they could do 1,000 units of rice, they have to choose. So the opportunity cost of producing 1,000 units of rice is foregoing the opportunity to produce 100 units of corn. Take that little equation there, divide both sides of it by 1,000, and you get the opportunity cost of producing 1 unit of rice, which is 100 over 1,000, which equals 0.1, or 1/10 of a unit of corn. In Alta, the opportunity cost of producing an additional unit of rice, because we're assuming constant opportunity cost, we got rid of that curvature, we got a straight line. The opportunity cost of producing an additional unit of rice is 1/10 of a unit of corn. What's the opportunity cost in Alta of producing 100 corn? Well, if they're going to produce 100 corn, they give up the opportunity to produce 1,000 rice. The opportunity cost of 100 corn is 1,000 rice. Divide both sides of that by 100, and that tells us the opportunity cost of producing 1 corn is 10 rice. 1,000 over 100 is 10. I'm going to rewrite those numbers here. Those exact same numbers are now here on the left-hand side. And now I'm showing you Beta again. In Beta, the Beta can produce 1,000 rice and no corn, or 2,000 corn and no rice. What do I want you to do? I want you to fill in those numbers. What's the opportunity cost? You fill in those numbers. What's the opportunity cost in Beta of producing 1,000 rice? Use that to figure out what's the opportunity cost in Beta of producing 1 rice. I'll give you a few seconds, and then there's going to be a clicker question where you get to click in your answer. Those yellow circles are going to show up again on the next slide. Don't panic. And then you get to click in your answer. What's the opportunity cost of producing 1 rice? A, B, C, D, or E. So the answer you came up with should be up there. Should be one of those 5, A, B, C, D, or E. The opportunity cost of producing 1 rice is how much? These are simple math questions. This is why you don't need to bring a calculator to class, because this is the kind of math you can do on your toes. 3 seconds. 1, 2, and 3. All right. What do we get? We get, pretty good, 87%. Get the happy face. So the opportunity cost, here, let me go back to the previous one. Show you there. The opportunity cost of 1,000 rice was 2,000 corn. Divide both sides by 1,000, so we have just 1 rice on the left. 2,000 over 1,000 is 2 corn. And then if we calculated the opportunity cost of corn, we find that the opportunity cost of corn was 1/2 of a unit of rice. So now let's compare Alta and Beta. Let's take this information and compare Alta and Beta, and compare for them their opportunity cost of producing rice and their opportunity cost of producing corn. So I'm going to make a little table. It's going to have Alta and Beta as the rows. It's going to have the opportunity cost of producing rice in the first column, the opportunity cost of producing corn in the second column. What do we know? We know that for Alta, we know that the opportunity cost of producing 1 bushel of rice was 0.1 corn for Alta and 2 corn for Beta. Who has the lower opportunity cost of producing rice, Alta or Beta? Alta. 0.1. 0.1 is less than 2. The opportunity cost of producing corn, just reprinting from the previous slide, the opportunity cost of producing corn is 10 rice for Alta and 1/2 of a rice for Beta. Who has the lower opportunity cost of producing corn, Alta or Beta? Beta. So the lower opportunity cost of producing corn goes to Beta because 0.5 is less than 10. And our first answer was Alta because 0.1 was less than 2. Now we finally get to the language of comparative advantage. When an economy or a person has a lower opportunity cost of producing something, we say they have the comparative advantage in the production of that good. So the comparative advantage in producing rice, we go back, we look, who had the lower opportunity cost? Alta has the lower opportunity cost of producing rice, and so we say that Alta has the comparative advantage in the production of rice. So whoever has the lower opportunity cost, economists say they have the comparative advantage. You need 2 goods and 2 parties. In this case, we've got countries. The comparative advantage in producing corn goes to Beta. Beta had a lower opportunity cost of producing corn than did Alta. Comparative advantage is different than absolute advantage. Absolute advantage refers to who of these 2, Alta and Beta, who can produce with some fixed quantity with the least amount of resources, or flip it around, who with the same amount of resources can produce a greater quantity. With the original data that we had, nobody had the absolute advantage in producing rice, because they both could produce the same amount of rice, and we're going to presume they have the same quantity of resources. And Beta has the absolute advantage in producing corn, because remember, if it devoted all of its resources to corn production, it was producing a lot more, 2,000 as opposed to 100 units of corn. The notion of the gains from trade is that when there are these differences in opportunity costs, if there's a legal way to trade, then these economies can specialize in producing the thing in which they have the comparative advantage, and then trade, and collectively there'll now be more output. Suppose that the initial levels of production of rice and corn, suppose that before trade, when they were both trying to be self-sufficient, that in Alta they were producing 800 units of rice and 20 units of corn, and in Beta they were producing 100 units of rice and 1,800 units of corn. I cannot add up all 4 of those numbers and get one number because I've got rice and I've got corn and those things are different. But I can compute the total amount of rice in the total amount of corn. There's 900 total units of rice, and there's 1,820 total units of corn. Suppose they trade. If they trade, alpha, because it had the comparative advantage in the production of rice, alpha is going to produce rice. I'll circle it that way. And beta had the comparative advantage in corn, so beta is going to produce corn. Alta is going to devote all of its resources to the production of rice. If they do that, what we saw was that alta can produce 1,000 units of rice and no corn. Beta is going to devote all of its resources to the production of corn because beta has the comparative advantage in the production of corn. Beta is going to produce no rice and 2,000 corn. Together, what do we have? We now have 1,000 units of rice and 2,000 units of corn. More rice and more corn than we had when both economies were self-sufficient. When there are differences in opportunity costs, they can specialize and trade, and collectively there'll be more output than there was initially. When we talk about the gains from trade, those gains are measured as the number of increased units. And so the gain in the amount of rice, we had 1,000 units of rice, whereas before we had 900. So the gain in rice is 100 units of rice. The gain in corn, we started at 1820. We went to 2,000. We had a gain of 100 units, 180 units of corn. We cannot combine those two numbers because rice and corn are different things. We can't add apples and oranges. We can't add rice and corn. We can't add bombs and cups of coffee. There's 100 more units of rice and 180 more units of corn. Now, this notion of the gains from trade applies to dorky little examples like rice and corn and alta and beta, one of your more boring made-up examples, but it also applies to more interesting things like the decline in marriage. So if we look at marriage patterns in the United States, what we see is that there has been a substantial decline in marriage in the United States since the 1970s. Fewer people are getting married, and people are getting married later. Let's think about why. Before the 1970s, we had in the United States an educational system and a culture that created differences between male and female, between men and women, in their ability to produce what we can call market goods, that is the ability to go into the marketplace and earn an income, and the ability to produce what we call home production. So clean houses, happy children, good food, and so on. In the 1960s, go ask somebody who was in high school in the 1960s. In the 1960s, in most high schools in California, in the United States, the girls were required to take home economics, and the boys were not allowed to do so. And the boys were required to take shop, and the girls were not allowed to do so. So we had an educational system that was teaching the boys how to have a craft that they could take out into the workplace, wood shop, metal shop, auto shop, a craft they could take out into the marketplace when they graduated from high school, and they could make an income with that. Girls couldn't take those courses. The girls were being taught how to cook, how to clean, how to raise children, how to sew, and the boys were not being taught those things. And those classes were boy-only and girl-only classes, and in most high schools they were required. Boys were required to take at least a semester and often a year of shop. Girls were required to take often sometimes a semester and sometimes a year worth of home ec. That educational system created a difference in opportunity costs between men and women in their production of household goods, home production, happy children, clean food. Well, that too. Happy children, clean houses, good food, there we go, home goods, and market goods, earning an income in the market. When we have big differences in opportunity costs, it makes sense for there to be specialization in trade. Men had a comparative advantage in working in the marketplace. They had a skill that they were taught in high school, and they didn't know how to boil water. They had a strong comparative advantage in the production of goods for the market, that is earning an income. Girls had a comparative advantage in home production. They knew how to raise happy children, they knew how to sew, they knew how to cook, they knew how to clean, but these were often not skills that translated into an income. They had a very strong comparative advantage in the production of home goods. And so what happens? Male and female come together, they get married, and they each specialize in trade. Together, they have more income, happier children, better food, and a cleaner house than they would if they each had individually tried to do these things on their own. Specialization in trade and the gains from trade. What happened starting in the 1970s? Well, starting in the 1970s, we get curricular reforms. Some schools get rid of shop classes altogether. Some schools get rid of home ec classes altogether. All schools remove the gender barriers. All schools say anybody can take shop who wants to. Anybody can take home ec who wants to. We spent a year in upstate New York when my son was in 8th grade. He was required in 8th grade to take a quarter of shop, I forget what it was, and a quarter of home ec. Everybody, boys and girls alike, were required to take these classes. With the change in the educational system, it means that there's now very little difference in the opportunity costs between any two individuals. Those gender differences have disappeared because our educational system has changed. We're no longer creating those differences in opportunity costs. The result, economists would predict, is exactly what we've seen. We see later marriage and we see less marriage. The median age at first marriage. Half the people in the country got married at an age older and half the people got married at an age younger the first time. In 1970, for women, it was 20.6, and for men, it was 22.5 years. Now the median age at first marriage for women is 26.1, and for men is 26.2. A huge increase in the median age at first marriage. People are postponing marriage. If you need to leave early, gentlemen, you need to sit on the floor at the back. It's disruptive to everybody if you stand up and walk out. What about postponing marriage? The percentage of 30 to 34-year-olds never married. In 1970, women 6%, men 9% of 30 to 34-year-olds had never married. By 2010, 27% of women and 36% of men ages 30 to 34 had never married. Huge differences in marriage patterns because there are no longer huge differences in opportunity costs, no longer as much gain from trade, therefore less specialization and trade, less marriage. Now, the question that we often ask, and this gets back to what we said before, is does everyone gain? When there are gains from trade, does everybody gain? Are the costs borne unevenly? Well, let's look back and see what's happening here. What do we have? We've got alta. Alta is now producing rice, and beta is now producing corn. What happened to the corn farmers in Alta? What happened to the corn farmers in Alta? They lost their farms. They lost their farms. Sure, there's more rice produced, there's more corn produced, but there are people who used to be corn farmers in Alta who are no longer farming. They lost their livelihood. They lost their farms. What happened to the rice producers in Beta? They lost their livelihood. They lost their farms. There are people who used to produce rice in Beta who are no longer doing so. They are bearing a disproportionate share of the costs of specialization trade. Not every person, not every individual benefits when economies pursue specialization and trade. It leads us to this question of whether or not there should be 100% specialization. Should we do this? Should we specialize in trade? There are gains from trade. There's going to be more output. The economy as a whole, on average, in the long run, is going to be better off. Should we do it? It's a normative question. Remember that anytime you're asked a normative question, anytime you're trying to answer a normative question, answering a normative question requires you to specify what's the goal we're trying to achieve. Should there be 100% specialization is not a question we can answer until we know what's the goal we're trying to achieve. If the goal we're trying to achieve is an increase in the total amount of output, independent of how that's distributed. If the goal we're trying to achieve is an increase in the total amount of output, the answer to the question is yes. If the goal is we want to increase the total amount of output, we're not concerned with a whole bunch of other things, then yes, we should have 100% specialization in trade because the gains from trade exist. If there are differences in opportunity costs, if information flows, if there are legal ways to trade, and what the hell was the fourth assumption? I don't remember. And if the fourth assumption is satisfied, then there are gains from trade. What was the fourth one? Opportunity costs, information, relatively cheap transportation. Then there are gains from trade, and there should be 100% gains from trade. So for instance, The United States has a clear comparative advantage in higher education. There are people in this room who are here from outside of the United States. That's how we export higher education to the rest of the world. Some of you are here from countries outside the United States, and that's great. Go Bears, we're glad you're here. That's an example of the export of higher education to whatever country those folks are from, or you all are from. We don't have, maybe we're getting back to it, but boy, for a good 30, 40 years, we did not have a comparative advantage in the production of cars. I'm going out of town to a conference, which is why I don't have office hours tomorrow. I get to go on a tour of a Honda factory in Columbus, Ohio, in Columbus, Ohio, on Friday morning. So I'm going to have all sorts of stories when I come back Monday about how we produce cars in this country. I'll know more on Monday than I know today. But I know this. For a long time, the United States did not have the comparative advantage in the production of cars. What does 100% specialization look like? It means that the United States should get out of the business of producing cars. Get out of the business of producing cars. Let Japan produce all the cars. And the United States instead should be producing education. Well, what does that look like? Detroit, oh, you want to see this? Detroit is the center of car production in the United States. Look what's happened to the population of Detroit since 1950, at the height of the car production years. The population of Detroit is now 713,000. It used to be 1.8 million. A decline in population in one of our biggest cities in the country. This is what Detroit looks like. This is what specialization looks like. If we specialize in trade, not everybody benefits. The people whose production is no longer needed, they bear the uneven share of the costs. That's an empty train station. It's the old train station in Detroit. It's completely abandoned. That's a church in Detroit. It's pretty much destroyed, right? That's what Detroit looks like from the air. I don't know if you can tell all those empty slots there. That's a house. That's an old car factory. That's what specialization in trade looks like. Yes, there are gains from trade, but the costs of specialization are not borne evenly. And for that reason, there is not an obvious answer to the question of should there be 100% specialization. Because maybe there are other goals beyond just maximizing the total amount of output that we as a society are trying to achieve. Y'all have a great weekend. Go Bears. I'll see you on Monday.